Hello writing besties, I'm so excited. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by my little corner of the internet. My name is Lainey. It is so nice to meet you. I'm so excited for this video because I'm officially announcing on this channel that I'm writing a book. I have written multiple stories before. I've written multiple books before. I've done different genres. I've done different format. So I've done like fantasy stuff, romance, sci-fi, children's book, which is a completely different format than just like regular book novel writing. I completely wrote it and drew it myself since I'm an artist and I do art as like my main passion. So I'm so excited to take on this new little journey of mine. My main passion project is a comic or anything mixing writing and art. So that's comics, mangas, graphic novels, web comics, things of that sort. Anyways, I have a main passion project, but it's always good to take a break from that. So we are going to be working on this new story together, and I'm going to take you through the brainstorming and partially of the outlining phase, and it's going to be chaotic, I think. At least in my head it was chaotic. It's gonna be super fun, and I'm so excited. We are going to write the book officially when November starts, but all of this here, this video, I'm hopefully everything's gonna work out, because I have work as well, so we'll see if everything works out. But I have this video, which is going to be the brainstorming and outlining phase. I have a like mood board, world building, etc. part 2 video, and part 3 is going to be developing the characters, actually drawing the characters. So definitely look out for all of that. With that said, we can start this video. I have my little notebook here. Like a month and a half-ish ago, I wanted to take a break from my passion project, like I said, and I wanted to go in thinking about a new story idea. So I thought of something and I was like, this seems very familiar to something I've already done before. So I jotted down everything I remembered from that original story idea onto my little notebook here. And then I was like, I had a story before. This was it. And I tried to find it everywhere, thinking that like I had already written it, or I written a good amount of it. Could not find it anywhere. And eventually, in one of my old middle school emails, I found a chapter 1 of the story in a script format that was unfinished. It was a partial first chapter. I say first draft, but it was only chapter 1. Partially done, and then I jot down everything from that script form of the partial chapter 1, and I looked at the things that I thought I remembered and looked at the things that was actually written down, and kind of picked and choose for this like new version or this new iteration or this overhaul what I actually wanted and thought that I could actually work with. And so because of that, I just kept writing until I filled out so many pages, and I was like, you know what, this is something I can actively do. I can see myself working on. I want to pursue this, or I'm taking this little creative break from my passion project. Let me see how far I can take this, and this is what this video is, seeing how far I can take this story idea. So with that little intro aside and that little history and background aside, we can actually officially get into the brainstorming process. Okay, so I just woke up, so I look a little rough. Not really, but I might feel not hyper and excited, but trust me, I really am. I can't express it right now. So what I want to do is take everything that I wrote in this little notebook in terms of like all those like concepting ideas, and I want to properly brainstorm for the story. There's a lot of things that needs to be figured out that in my little like throwing out ideas, word vomiting on the page, that I didn't take into account, and I want to kind of figure that out. For example, I have like some questions in terms of like, okay, so for example, in the beginning of the story, I don't know whether or not the main character, her dad, is dead prior to the story starting, or does he die at the beginning of the story. Depending on how I want to do something very specific as a reveal later on in the story, it will determine then which, like for her dad, is he alive prior to the story, or is he alive in the beginning of the story and then dies. So I want to figure that out, because both versions of like what happened to the dad has their pros and cons. So everything's so interconnected, and I just have to kind of word vomit again, but with a little bit more structure to figure some of those questions out. I think it's important in terms of, okay, so I also want to figure out, and I'm gonna circle around back to this dad part. So let's see if my mind can connect it all. But I want to figure out, obviously, like my theme and my message. What do I want to showcase? You know, is it found family? So then, you know, you have that aspect. Is it about like self-love? Is it about sacrifice and being a martyr, self-sacrifice? Like things are like, these are the things that like you probably need to think about. Not probably, you definitely need to think about, because then you can have different moments, like you would know the key moments to ensure like that comes across. So by the end of the book, it all makes sense under that like little umbrella term. It's not so easy. You can't just say I want my theme to be this and then it just like starts clicking, because there's a multitude of different ways you can go about doing a very similar thing. So if you have like the example of character revenge, so like characters taking revenge in the beginning of your story, you can go the route of like kind of like a good way to do it, and kind of like, it's not a horrible way to do it, but this is like an opposite approach that I feel like at least me as a viewer and a consumer did not like as much. My examples for something like this in terms of like revenge slash like being betrayed slash being framed storylines, on one hand you have, it's not pronounced gachita kuda, I think it's pronounced gachita, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And then on the other hand you have Dead Man Wonderland, which is also an anime. A little spoilers for the both of them, or maybe I'm planning on also saying one more example, so spoilers just around. In Dead Man Wonderland, the main character guy, he is framed for killing his entire class, and then he's being put in this like specialized prison, right? And he's, you know, he's betrayed, he's being framed, and he's trying to take revenge on that. Same thing, Rudo in Gachita. He is betrayed and framed for killing his father, and then he wants to take revenge, and because, you know, there's like a status hierarchy and everything, he was at the bottom, so he wants to take revenge and stuff like that, right? Me personally, on one hand you have an anime who made me care enough for the reason for his revenge, and then you have another anime that I did not care about and did not finish. I think one of the problems with Dead Man Wonderland is that the entire class being killed, yeah, that's horrific, but I'm pretty sure, I mean, this was years ago as well, but I'm pretty sure maybe like one of the characters, maybe two, had like a line, barely a line here and there, like a short line, I mean, and then like they were dead. So there was no reason for me to care for the fact that this little boy was framed. But I think that the whole like death of it all was so quick that I did not care for the class, nor did I care and get to know the main character in the beginning to care why he was framed. While on the other hand, Gachita is still airing, and I'm like weekly wanting to watch the show to kind of figure out, you know, who off his own man. And while like the character of his dad, like while he wasn't like on screen for so long, because like this was like within the first episode he died, we have like, they built up a character for him. You saw that he took Rudo in, you saw that like he gave, you know, Rudo these gloves, you saw that, you know, he was a very funny and charismatic guy, rooting for Rudo and his like love for this girl at the beginning. Like there are things, even though he was short-lived on the screen, that like made you want to root for him, or made you sad for his death and now want to root for Rudo. So I want to keep that in mind, because you can't just do a revenge story and be like, okay, let's start killing off mad people, let's just, and then like that you know, all these people die, so like XYZ, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm not gonna give a shit. Like as a consumer, I'm not gonna give a shit that these people die if I don't really know them at like the very least. So we have like these kind of like two ways to kind of approach a revenge story in terms of like the casualty and how many people die for XYZ person to take revenge, plus the reason, and there's also connection. I mean, you have this father figure, and then you have like a class we barely saw on screen for like a minute, so there's that. So I want to like use the media that I watch and be like, okay, you know, maybe this is what I want to say, this is what I want to say, how has this been done before? And as someone who's, you know, who can critically watch what I read, what I critically analyze what I read, what I watch, etc., like which way do I know as a viewer and a consumer and a reader that I don't particularly like, and in which way do I like it to be done, to ensure then I'm properly doing it the way for my own stories. So I'm gonna keep that in mind. And then for another aspect to this, in terms of like consuming and figuring out, you know, how I want to portray specific things, I don't necessarily have to take what I am, like the genre that I'm in, to pull from, because there's like a wide web of like a bunch of stuff being out, and like one way or another like you're gonna find intersectionalities between multiple different media that you probably don't even realize. So for example, oh my god guys, welcome to my TED Talk. Okay, you have the Red Shoe trio, right, which is Yuji Itadori from Jujutsu Kaisen, Miles Morales, Spider-Man from Marvel Comics, and Deku/Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia. These three have much more in common than you realize. Obviously 2 out of the 3 are part of like a superhero media, 2 out of the 3 are Japanese media, but I think, you know, one of the big connection is all 3 of them start their story, they are powerless. And if that's the type of story you want to write, like your character not having abilities in the beginning of the story, I mean, you have other things to pull from. Maybe it's like they always had the power all along, and you have stories like, you know, Harry Potter, for example, right? But you can also pull from the fact that they end up gaining their ability at the beginning of the story, and then they have to kind of live up to this mantle of who had the ability before them, and you know, become worthy of the fact that they have this new ability. And so all 3 gain abilities at the beginning of their stories. Obviously Miles Morales, he gets bit by a spider, now he has to live up to the mantle of Spider-Man. Is a very heavy title. Deku/Izuku Midoriya, he eats All Might's hair follicle, and then Yuji Itadori eats Sukuna's finger, and he becomes Sukuna's vessel, and then, you know, he gets these abilities. Obviously all three of these things are slightly different after they gain their abilities. You have Yuji Itadori now having like this cursed spirit within him, and so that's like a new character that gets brought into the storyline, because Yuji's, you know, his vessel, so that's something unique and different to Jujutsu Kaisen's story. So there's like similarities between these 3 characters, there's differences between these characters. So if you were writing like some sort of exorcism story and you're like, oh, this is kind of like something similar that I want to do, you have 2 superhero medias, one Japanese, one American, who has kind of a similar start in their storylines, and you could be like, oh, I'm gonna pull something from here, I really like that, I'm gonna pull something from here. Obviously not direct copies, but get inspired by, because you don't have to pull within the same genre that you're doing, because there's a lot of intersectionalities between everything that we read, watch, play, etc, etc, etc. That is my long thing of me saying I'm gonna have to edit this in like 1.5 speed or something, but that's my long way of saying like I need to brainstorm everything that I'm gonna be like, everything that could possibly come up in my storyline, and then if I get stuck in terms of questions, I can use existing media out there to then be like, okay, how has this been done? You know, back to the dad in my story, how has a parental figure who is really, really important to a character's storyline, how has it been done if they were dead prior to the story being set? Were they even a focus then? Or how is it when they die at the beginning of their storyline? How does that impact the plot? So I need to word vomit, brainstorm with a little bit more structure, and I will get to you guys when I have some cohesiveness and clarity in regards to my brainstorm. Hello. So a little quick update. I was struggling. Oh, Jesus. Oh my gosh, what's going on? I'm sorry if the honking continues. I think there's I assume there's traffic because I'm hearing that loud ass honk from probably a truck, and then I'm hearing mad little beeps from cars. So apologies by that. What was I saying? I'm lost in my head right now. I was struggling a little bit the other day when I was writing everything down and kind of like brainstorming. So first of all, I took all the concepts that I did in terms like in my little book here. So I read through them to figure out where my head was at a couple of weeks ago when working on this, and kind of like, because I did this like near the end of August, and kind of figure out like anything that was old, do I still want? Anything that was new that I wrote down, do I still want? And then I took everything over to my iPad. So I brainstorm in this like endless whiteboard app called Freeform. It comes for free on the iPad. So endless whiteboard, I'm over here brain dumping everything down, and then I get stuck because I realize that I'm just rehashing and rewriting what I wrote in this notebook, which is not something I want to do because nothing right now is concrete. I wanted to go into this opening up my brain and all these creative ideas and let the creative juices flow and just kind of like brain dump everything, because at the time when I was originally writing it in the notebook, I had so many ideas and I'm taking up so many pages. How many pages did I write? 1 2 3 4 5 10 pages, like front and back. And I had to like just stop myself because I'm like, girl, you do like continue this on the iPad and XYZ. And I felt like I was stuck. So I realized I was just rewriting everything that I wrote in the notebook, and I was basically using that like it's concrete, which I don't want that to happen because some of the stuff I wrote down don't make sense, and the point was to brainstorm and figure out new things and stuff like that. So it wasn't working the other day. This morning, woke up, ate some breakfast, put on YouTube, going through my playlist and just like watching stuff, and I'm like, it just clicks. Like I just had like this small little thing in my head, and I was like, okay, quickly let me take the iPad out, started writing things down, and now like things are actually moving, and I feel like I'm actually figuring out stuff properly, which I'm so excited about. So here is what the new thing was. So I was really confused about what I wanted the magic system to be. I wanted to play around with the ideas of crystals. I didn't know if I wanted the magic system to be the ability of physically controlling crystals, or if the crystals had powers within them and then the user can use the crystal's power. So like the power wouldn't come out of them, it would come from the crystal, and they would use the crystal's magic by like activating or putting their own mana into the crystal to activate it, to trigger the power to work, and they can control it that way. So I had 3 different groups that I was kind of playing around with, which were mages who are using these crystals, and they would probably have it as necklaces, bracelets, whatever the case is. Then you have mages who would use crystals that are infused into weapons, and then you will have non-mages or non-mana users who would use those same weapons. And I felt like it was too big with having these 3 separate groups, because I was already playing around with the idea of having in this like organization that are fighting these creatures and stuff like that. I was playing around with the idea of you're gonna have the offensive line and the defensive line. So that means each of those groups are going to have that. So then there's like 6 mini groups within that like large 3 groups of like the type of fighters. And then within that, I was thinking like, oh, okay, if I don't do the offense defense thing, which of the 3 groups would be more of a support type fighter style, and which one would be the actual main fighter? And like I said, it was all getting a little too confusing. There was just too many groups, so I decided like, okay, let me focus on just one. And I was really trying to do the first group, which were the mages who use the crystals, and they probably like wear it as jewelry, earrings, stuff like that. But I really fell in love with this weapon crystal infusion type tech thing, and so I want to play around with that. So my story is still fantasy, but it's less like, oh, powers coming out of your hand type shit, and more like this militarized action story, which is so crazy because I never done something like that before. I've gone on out of my element and written horror and sci-fi, but this like military type thing, like I've never done before. So I'm excited to see where that takes me and what I can do with it. I'm gonna play around with some ideas here. I'm probably gonna work for like another 10-20 minutes or so, and then we'll kind of see where we're at with that. But I'm excited and I'm happy, and I'm glad things are moving forward. And let's hope things work out, or we might have to revert back to what I am familiar with and good at in terms of like fantasy and magic systems. Unbelievably hot. I'm going in and out of like being able to focus and not being able to focus, and I absolutely hate it because I'm so like giddy right now, and it just sucks when I'm like the hotness is like putting my mood down, and I'm just like, I don't want to do anything. So I decided, you know what? Let's take a little bit of a pause right now on the brainstorming because I think I'm at a really good area with it. One thing of note is I was figuring out the ranking system. In my original concept, I had a 10-tier ranking system and they went by numbers. But this one, I was like, you know, actually that it like made sense in the concepting stage. But because I'm also changing the magic system or the fighting system in the world, like I told you about previously, having all of that no longer made any sense. So I was like, okay, let me condense it, and I did it to a 6-tier ranking system, but alphabets instead. And I still felt like that was a little too much, so I managed to bring it down to a 4-tier ranking system: low, mid, high, and elite. From elite being S rank down to low being C ranked. I think another big thing I did was figuring out the beginning, middle, and end. So in terms of like the beginning of the story, I'll just like share what I wrote down. So I said that Sage, our main character, she lives in a hidden forest. And also I didn't write it down in terms of like, this is the structure and things like that. I just wrote like the beats, like, no, not even the beats, because the beats is also sequential. I just took notes of like everything that I want in the beginning. And I think what we're gonna do now, it's when we outline, I will make it in sequential order. But in terms of my notes for the beginning, I said that Sage lives in a hidden village forest, or hidden forest village. She meets this hunter named Atticus, and she saves him from a monster, showcasing and like revealing her abilities. She uses a bow and arrow to fight. Her father dies during this monster attack. I said that the two leave the forest and they end up traveling together to this like the organization that she's gonna eventually be a part of, and that's where the whole militarized part of the aspect of the story comes into play. Before they actually get to the organization, I wrote down that they go to the town. It's at the edge of the forest. There she gets kidnapped. We'll see about that, I don't know. And then I just had some questions here. So in the original concepting, Sage had a crystal inhibitor, but because I'm not doing that like crystal jewelry aspect, the crystal inhibitor was a necklace, I don't know if that's gonna be kept. So I had to figure out like how, because the crystal inhibitor gets broken and that was what was gonna reveal her powers. So I had to figure out like what was gonna trigger everything for Atticus to learn about her abilities, for then her to leave the village, the village that she's a part of. So I played around with some questioning, kind of figured out the answer, played around with some more questions. And I think we're at a good spot a little bit here. So I am ready to start outlining a little bit. Now we're gonna move on to outlining. About a month and a half ago, I learned about what a plot grid was. So I've known about like different like ways to like outline and plot your stories, but I didn't know about like that table plot grid method. And so about a month and a half ago, from the passion project that I'm currently working on, that I'm taking a break for, to do this story instead, so it doesn't lead to burnout, because it's always good to kind of pace yourself with a really heavy project like the one I'm currently working on. But with that story, I did a plot grid. Absolutely loved how I did. I shared it with my sister. She loved it, and she said she was gonna like implement it and stuff like that. So I told her like, you know, I sent it over so she can get an idea and things of that sort. So that's what we're gonna do here. I love making world building Bibles, and I think in the next video I'll do one with you guys. But I'm just gonna open up some sort of doc, some sort of thing where I can make the plot grid right now, and then once we make that world building Bible in the next video, I can transfer over all that over. So let me stop talking and let's just get into it, because I feel like I'm talking a lot in this video, but it's just because I'm so excited. Oh my god. But I love typing on my keyboard here. But I want to take you guys through the outlining stage, at least talk through it while I'm actually doing it. So we're just going to use the more silencer keyboard here. Okay, so first let's open up Opera, and then okay, so I got into my account. I'm gonna show the screen in a second. I'm just seeing what my previous world Bible, or I guess my current world Bible looks like, so I know like how many spots do I leave blank, so I can just do the plot grid. So let me add a new name. I haven't thought of a project name. Literally how I always do and how I've always done my stories is the title is one of the first things that I do. And so for the current one I'm taking a break on, a title never came to me. So that was the first time I ever gave a story a temp name, or I went in giving a story a temp name because I couldn't think of it. Then I just love the temp name so much I can't remove it now. So I think we'll just name it the main character's name. Scary. We're gonna open up our table and we're gonna go all the way with our table here. So I think we need like 2 for the top 2. The top part of our plot grid is gonna be the like main points of your plot grid. So that's gonna be your acts, your chapter number, your plot, things like that. The left side here is gonna be like your chapter 1, your chapter 2, your chapter 3. If you're doing your acts, that's where you're gonna write your act 1, your act 2, act 3. Depending on what the story structure you're doing, that's gonna be in the sequential order that you're writing that story structure. And then this column here, right under that top column, is for like extra information that you might need. I think in the original plot grid or the typical plot grid that you might see, it's just the first column and first row that are being utilized, but I like to use the first column and the first 2 rows instead. So for this first row, we're gonna do a green theme. I think we're gonna do acts. We're gonna do plot structure. In terms of like the plot structure or the story structure, I really love hero's journey. You have the 3 or 5 act plot structure, your typical like, you know, the pyramid. The next one is chapters, the themes, so keeping track of whatever themes you want to do. Then we're gonna have our main plot, we're gonna have our subplots, the character arcs. Alrighty, so under story structure, this is where I'm gonna write my what, so I know what the story structure that I'm working with is. Main plot point, this first box under that is going to be your summary, and then as like the chapters progress, you will write what's happening in your chapter in regards to the main plot point. You could just write everything that's happening in your chapter, or specifically the parts that relate to your main plot. And then your subplot, because it's your subplot, not every chapter has to showcase your subplot. You can have maybe something here written down for your first chapter, and then your subplot doesn't pick up again or be shown until a couple of chapters later. But everything in regards to that subplot gets written down. And then for the character arcs, it's who is in that character arc. Also, what you could do here, especially if you're like a romance story, or your story is very focused on like rivals and foils of characters, then you can also have relationships here or character dynamics. And then you'll write like who is that, like who is it being focused on, and then as the chapters go on, you'll list that. Okay, now we have to outline and figure these out. So I have this article here of 11 popular plot types with examples. And so I'm just gonna read through these to figure out which plot structure I'm going to do. Okay, so the 3 story structures that I've settled on is the Dan Harmon story structure, the 7-point story structure, and the Victian curve. For the Dan Harmon one, you have you, need, go, search, find, take, return, change. I can see the comfort zone being Sage's village. The need is her wanting to go on an adventure, get out of this village that she's been trapped in her whole life. Then she enters this unfamiliar situation to chase that desire. That's when like the monster attacks and she's like fighting it and everything. And for the Victian curve, if I'm even pronouncing that right, that one you have rising action, the climax, and falling action. And so within rising action, it says that the stakes keeps climbing, so it's like crisis upon crisis. They just kind of stack on top of each other till it pushes the character out of their comfort zone. Then for the climax, everything comes to a head. Every threat, every secret, every choice converges in this one high stake moment. And then for the falling action, after the storm breaks, you give your character room to breathe. Loose ties are tied up, or loose ends are tied up, and then they come back to this new normal. At least for like what I just said for the Dan Harmon one, that beginning part can fit for this rising action in terms of like crises on top of crises. The monster attacks, she loses her father, she has to leave the village and travel and all these like different stuff happen. I mentioned in the brainstorming thing that I had an idea that at the beginning of their adventure she gets kidnapped. So, like, you know, that's another crisis, her coming to this organization, and then everything that happens there. And then when it gets like her reveal happens. So I can see that being like, I can see the story following that as well. And then for the 7-point structure, that one you have your hook, plot point 1, pinch point 1, midpoint, pinch point 2, plot point 2, resolution. So then for the hook, we have, like I said, Sage in this village, that spark of intriguing the audience to draw her in, or to draw them into the story. Is the fact that she wants to leave. You know, we get introduced to monsters, we get introduced to the crystals and what they could like what they are. I think that's a good hook for the storyline. Then you have your inciting incident that disrupts the normal. Then the first real clash with the antagonist forces the protagonist to confront what's truly at stake. That could be the whole monster attack itself, or sometime into her journey with Atticus when they're traveling to the organization. Maybe it's once she gets kidnapped, maybe it's a different part. We get introduced to the antagonist of the story. So maybe it's not exactly we see the antagonist yet, or like Sage meets the antagonist, but it could be an underling of the antagonist. So but she gets introduced to more evils in the world that's not just monsters. After saying this out loud, I think I've narrowed it to the Dan Harmon or the 7-point structure. I think the 7-point structure will work best for the story. The 7-point story structure. Okay, I think I'm gonna work on this and then you guys will see the finished setup. Okay, so this is what it is starting to look like. I am gonna obviously like go in and fill it out more, but for this base wise, and so you can see an example of how I'm going about working on this plot grid, this is how it is. For some subplots, we have Atticus, the hunter that she meets, this like slightly older man than her. He is looking for his missing sister, as I don't think it's gonna be within the first 2 chapters. Like, we'll find out, like we're not gonna know like what's his deal, but some chapters in we'll find out that like why he was out there at the forest, why they crossed paths, and it's related to like him traveling to find his missing sister. For character dynamics, we have Sage and Atticus, and this is going to be student mentor thing. So you're gonna see that I'm gonna fill in this first box here, and that's when they meet. So that's the start of like their character dynamic starting, or their relationship starting. This can also just be tabbed as relationships. I think we'll see their relationship form every single chapter up until they get to the organization, and then from there I think I'll make sure that we have a break so we can see what these characters are like when they're not together and kind of see a difference to them. So other than that, this is what we're working with. I wanted to just do this so you guys can get an example of what this kind of looks like. I'm going to continue working on it. get scrubbed. So we're gonna figure that out. How fun. Okay, so I'm a little bit stuck. In the original version, I had it that the main character, wore a crystal inhibitor because I wanted to have this kind of like reveal of her abilities. But in this new like militarized world, that doesn't make any sense because you don't have the abilities like coming out of your hand. It's just you putting your mana into the crystals that has that magic, and then based on your mana output will determine like the strength of the crystal's magic. And the crystal inhibitor does not make any sense, but I kind of still want this reveal of her abilities because the mana output, your mana output, is still like a big deal in this world. The new reveal won't be the type of magic she has, it will be her mana output. So now I'm just trying to figure out why, because this reveals in chapter 3, I'm trying to figure out why it wasn't revealed before. Before it was with the crystal, she wore that as a necklace, it broke. So but now I need to figure out a new reason why said reveal wasn't before, because in the beginning we see her use some sort of like fighting technique and abilities to stop a small monster creature in chapter 1, and then chapter 2 there was more monster fighting, and now we're in chapter 3. So why did it take up to chapter 3 for this reveal to happen? Crystal inhibitors are no longer make sense in the context of this world. That's kind of where I'm stuck at. So I'm just gonna make a note. Yeah, I'll just make a note here so I can move on, because I'm on a really good pace with the outline so far. I just gotta like figure out new version of crystal inhibitor, and I'll know what inhibitor, and future me would know what I'm talking about. And then we'll just move on. So without looking at the act structure, because I have to fix that up, this is what the outline is looking like. I'm gonna have to probably blur. This is definitely transformed from just being like just a couple of notes to like full on. Anything in blue are like dialogue ideas that I wanted to jot down within the outline so I didn't forget. Anything in red are like suggestions for updates that I can do to the outline, or any questions that I have that I have to go back and answer. Hi guys, so we have officially come to the end of this video. So sad. I put all the clips a couple of days ago into my editor, and it is 100 well, 1 hour and 46 minutes, and I really have to condense it. I might even speed up some parts, especially come to the end of this video. I have not actually finished outlining everything yet, but I am coming up to a close of finishing and outlining completely Act 1, which is like so crazy. I don't know how long this book is going to be in terms of chapters, in terms of word count. I'm not going into that during this whole process. I don't know, later on, right before November hits, when we officially start actually writing draft 1 or draft 0 or whatever it's going to be called, if I will have that, or if I'm just gonna actually completely go in and do the entirety of everything without knowing. I mean, I guess if I finish the outline, I'll at least know how much chapters is going to be, but things are always subject to change. But I'm capping it here because I feel like this video is already too long and I can't really go through the entire process of the outlining without this being over an hour long. So we're gonna cap it here. It's been super great so far. I think any terms of updates in terms of the outline and stuff like that might be the next video. If I post any other videos in between this one and the next writing related video, I might do an update there. We shall see, so stick around for that. But thank you guys so much for sticking around and stopping by my little corner of the internet. I'm so excited for this little journey of ours, for this little journey of mine, and I will see you in the next one. Yeah, okay. Bye bye.